thank you for joining me. Today I have an interesting project. I'm going to make this fabric into a dress using this pattern here, and the lady said it's actually her nightie, but she likes the style. She wants it slightly altered, so let's get on with it. She doesn't want the buttons down the front, this to be straight instead of a V. She also wants these straps to be a little wider than they are. I am going to press these out. It's a single layer of fabric with trim on both sides, which means that it causes the strap to wrinkle up a little bit. I just want to make sure that I have a good pattern to go from. I'll do the back as well. I'm thinking the best way of cutting this is to block it because it's quite squared off for the majority of the pieces. Start with the ruffle at the bottom, which comes to just under 3 inches. Move that up to 5/8, which is the general seam allowance for dressmaking, and then come down. So that comes to 3.5, 4.5 is my length. I'm going to cut it at 6, so there's a little bit of weight at the bottom. So we're going to put frill 6-inch cut. I have to be very careful not to overstretch any of this. That takes it to 27 inches, 28.5 long, and across takes it to 27. So basically this is a square piece of fabric, so it's 28.5 by 28.5. Cut 2 at that, front and back. I'm folding that up to 30 inches so that I can cut it down. All I've done is I've folded that edge along there so it's nice and even, push that into place there and cut along the edge here, straightening the fabric as I go. Seeing as it's a little bit easier to iron when things are in smaller pieces, that is what I'm going to do. I'm not going to need the whole width of this for the dress, so I will be cutting the other pieces out because I think they'll fit. I've just ironed this so it's nice and flat and checked my measurements, which come to 30, because I thought if it was squiffy it's easier to cut it down than to try to make it bigger. It's not ironed perfectly, but it will do. Half of 28.5 is 14.25. If I bring that back to 15, then when I cut it into shape I can take the edge off from there. Ease this into shape and then cut down. I've taken it to 15 at the beginning of the fluff there, and I wanted it at 14.25. Turn that there like that. Put the end of my ruler on the fold there like that. And you know what? I'm not going to be too fussy about how wide. I'm going to cut it. Actually, I'm going to cut it at 14.75 all the way down. It's a little bit wider, but it'll be fine. And then I cut the border off as I go. As I move the ruler down, I'm trimming that rough edge off at the same time. Nice and simple. With the centre at the back, I'm going to put a little clip there. So I'm going to use this to curve round the base of the front slightly to give it a little bit more shaping. What I'm doing here is I'm measuring in 5/8, which is there on the side, and 5/8 from the bottom, and that gives me the seam allowance for the new dress. Move it along, don't stretch it, just kind of pat it into place like that, and again move that in 5/8 from the side, pin it, and then to the top. I'm doing the back at the moment, so I need one of each side. Move that in 5/8 like that. I'm going to tuck the front arm shaping down and then pin that into place like that. With my tape measure, I'm going to carefully cut this shaping like this and on up. The yoke of the dress comes in there. I'm going to bring that out as a straight line, put a little cut there like that. I'm actually going to alter the arm slightly and also on here, and I don't want to get them mixed up. Line that up with the outside here and put a mark here, and at the same point here on the underside, because I'm going to shape this slightly, not by much. Line up that mark with the outside edge at the bottom. Let's do it that way, it'll hold it better. Because I am absolutely convinced that that dress is not really square on, that it's slightly angled. Cut that off, and I'll do the same with the front. I'm not going to alter the back armhole at this point, it doesn't really matter. Just done that with the front, and I'm going to put right sides together like that. I'm going to work from the bottom up, put a pin on that end and also one on this end. I'm going to start here, go forward and back, keeping these raw edges together. I'm going to sew all the way up, shorten that stitch just a wee tad. Because I haven't put the armholes in on both sides, I can work this way up. If there's any alteration, it won't matter. The top is about here and back. I'm going to open that seam like that, fold the raw side over and into the back of the seam like that, and run a row of stitching up. Because I don't have a serger, I don't get a really nice finish on a zigzagged seam, so I tend, when I'm dressmaking, roll the seam back. Just makes side seams look neater. And then I'll run up the second side in a minute. Don't take your seam over your stitches, otherwise it gets bulky. I do French seams on children's clothes as a general rule. As with the side seam of the dress, I folded this under and secured it so that there's no loose ends. I'm going to fold this over and put the new hem on. So I'm going to use this to measure up my inch like that, fold the raw edge into there, and then I can start sewing across. Measure up my next section. I could have ironed it, but sometimes it's just as well to do it this way. And so, it's my next section. Measure it up, put a little mark like that in it so that you can see on the other side where the raw edge needs to be folded into. This is quite an easy method. I'm going to repeat that all the way along the base of this frill. When I got all the way round, I overstitched my few stitches here and then did a reverse just to make sure that everything is tight in there. All loose ends have been removed. I am going to start at the centre back, and I am going to put an extra long stitch in a straight line all the way round. I'm going to put the frill on before I do the top. At the moment I've only put a little cut in the centre back. I'm going to put the seam and that together. Here's the centre front, so I'm going to do a little nick there. I've got 3 lengths in the frill, so I am going to centre the front panel. You always put seams on such things away from the centre, so just make sure the centre panel of frills, no matter what you're doing, is in the main view of your eye. Make sure your ruffle is even. The times I have accidentally twisted something are numerous. I have the centre with its mark, and I'm going to mark it up with the centre of the front like that. Then I'm going to put my centre front and my centre back together, pull them out to the side, so there's my fold there, and then there's the dress, there's the side, put those two together like that and pin it. Put that mark and that mark together, pull out the dress, pull out the fabric like that, put the fold of the dress and the fold of the frill together and pin in place. Then you can dissect it more if you want to. I often do. So I'm going to put that pin and that pin together, that, and put that into place. You should have about 16 pins in there holding everything so it doesn't move. If you have a ruffle foot, I would still do it like this, but all of this would be gathered up and therefore it goes in and there shouldn't be all this gaping that I've got. Repeat this process all the way around the dress. The length of frill is twice the distance of the base of the skirt. I prefer that. Some people might want to only do it 1.5 times, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I think for a dress you need to be a little bit more bold with what you're doing. The centre back is over here. Pull your thread like this. Push your fabric along like that. If you over pull it, makes it a little bit easier because it will go through to the next layer. It takes a little minute just to set this up. Once it gets working, it's a lot easier. 4 sections done, which takes me halfway around the back of the skirt. This is the reason why you put your pins this way, because if you put them sideways, it's very difficult for the pleats to cross your pins. These are really tight, so I'm going to just carry on spreading them out from there into another section. Because they're in little sections, after a while the whole thing will just stop working, so that's why you need to just carry on moving your fabric along the thread to even it out. I might do another length. I'm always a little bit wary because some fabrics will cause your thread to break, which is why people put 2 rows of stitches in together. I just don't. I'm going to really get those up tight, and with this thread I'm going to wrap it around the pin in a figure of 8, just a couple of twists like that. That will hold it nicely. Push that a little bit towards there, and then ease the fabric along the thread until the length of fabric in that first section is exact. I'm going to just bring it a little bit away from that center because I've got other threads going in. Make sure that all of my pleats are going up and down. Those raw edges have to be level with the top. Twist those into place like that, sew in a straight line. Pull it slightly but not too much. Make sure that they're nice and even. That's where my pin is. I'm going to gently ease that onto the next section, this onto the next section, so that the section I'm going to be sewing in has the right amount of fabric going into place. I'm not going to move that pin. I'm going to adjust my frills along so it looks nice and even. I've seen some people that end up with gaps where the pins are. Try not to do that. I can sew over this pin because it's going up and down. Pull that out. There's a little bit of extra fabric there, so I'm going to ease more of that fabric along there. Again, make sure all of the ripples on here are going up and down, not side to side, and then sew. If you feel that you have to adjust anything, do so as you go along. Coming into the next pin, allow that to be moved along towards the center of the dress, and all of that into place. Where a seam is, it sometimes doesn't want to travel along the thread, and that's usually where you're going to get a breakage. It might hold. Move that along here so that that's nice and even. They sometimes like to twist as they go along the thread. Start pulling the thread for the other side so there's not quite so much stress on that one single thread, and pull that into place as well. Ease it on round to the centre front here. Move that into place there. Carry on round to the back of the dress. Always make sure those little pleats at the top don't go underneath, otherwise they'll show on the front and then you have to undo sections. As I get closer, I'll be able to ease more to the back as I go round. Even if you had a ruffler, you'd still have to make sure those top little frills are up, not going into the seam. I've just checked everything and this seam has come forward, so I'm going to clip along here, opening it up, and then just re-sew about 1 inch either side of that join. I don't want that being there like that. Pop that under there, run the seam here along the side, put it on my favourite zigzag, and just zigzag all of this into position, and then it will just keep everything nice and tidy. Just make sure that this underneath here doesn't get caught up. All the way around. I am also going to top stitch as close as I can to where the frill is, maybe a little bit further up. There we go. Make sure that the frill is going up so that this holds it into place. All the way around. I know that I've altered the length slightly, so what I've done is I've put the end of the dress and the nightie together like that, pulled it out flat, so I know that I've got the extra length. Because the frill on here is a little bit deeper, it shortened the length of the main dress, and it has altered. All I'm going to do here is I'm going to cut towards here. This is where the new bodice is going to go in, and then I'm going to cut round. I think I'm leaving about 1/4 inch seam allowance. I'm cutting both sides at the same time like this, all the way around, oops a daisy, to the top. Even if I put a mark in there, it's not going to make any difference. I will, however, put a mark here which allows me to go up to that point. This will be going under the arm, and I'm cutting it initially at 1.5 inches, just like I would for piping, really, all the way across. And I need 2 of these. I have the under the arm placement here, and my piece of fabric which is on the bias, take that to the top. I'm only going to put on about 1/4 inch seam allowance. I want it really tight. Forward, back, and then around. Bring the bias tape onto the arm shaping here. I've sewn this into position and I want it to roll around just enough to be caught in. I'm going to do it this way. Feel where it comes and slice down. Careful enough not to cut anywhere else. I'm going to take that much fabric off all the way along this piece of trim. I always prefer to know that I've put more on rather than less and cut it back than not have enough to start with. Being careful not to cut anything that I'm not meant to be cutting. And I'll do the same on the second side. I've very carefully ironed this out so it's nice and even all the way around. Roll that piece of fabric under there like that. Roll that under like that so that this seam here is just in from the edges, perfect, because you don't really want the underside showing through. Slide that underneath like that and sew into position all the way around the underarm. It's easier if you pull the seam slightly back as you go round. Make sure that your dress or top or whatever it is you're doing this with is also nice and even. Make sure you actually put your stitching on the trim. Because this is a cotton, it's a lot easier to keep straight. If it was a knitted fabric, I might have a little bit of a problem. This will not twist forward because it's sewn tight in. And I will do this on the second side as well. It's really easy to do because all you're doing, you're squaring it off all the time. You're not pulling the trim down or up, you're just pulling it into position sideways. It doesn't matter which direction the seam is in, I'm always pulling it away. And that guarantees that the curvature of the binding stays firm and flat. That seems to have gone in a lot better on that side, so I will undo this side where it's a little bit funky, which is here, and I will pull it back a little bit harder and redo it. Along the back of here, I need to put gather stitches in. I'm going to come in a little ways, just inside of where the trim is. I don't want to go too close to the end. I had slightly shaped the back, and I'll extend that to the longest stitch. Just like I did on the ruffle at the bottom. And finish just before I get to the end there. I've got this piece of interfacing. Put this down on here, make it a little bit shy, and then cut round it. I will be doing this to both front and back and also both straps. I've got the pellon on the top like that. I prefer to have it slightly smaller than the piece that it's going on, and I am going to steam this into place all the way along like this. Plenty of steam to get it stuck on there. Make sure it's nice and smooth, and then I'm going to do it from the front as well. I'll get on and do the same with the others so that everything is nice and firm. This is the back of the garment, and if I go from the outside edge there all the way across to the outside edge there, it's 13 3/8. Then if I do the same at the top, there to there, it's 12 1/4. Let's double check that. I'm going to make it 13 1/4 there, and then 12 1/4 at the top. And then I've got to add in my seam allowances as well. Half of 13 1/4. Let's work that one out. It's there to there, and then 5/8 takes it to 7 1/4. Let's see what I got here. I'll still do it the same way, and then 5/8 takes it to 6 3/4. Let's flip that. 6 3/4 to here. Make sure that that's nice and even. Then I'm going to curve it out like that. It's going to be a little bit shy, but it'll be fine. That's that side. This is the front piece. On the front, I've put stabilizer on. Put that on top of here like that and up, and the same on this side. The piece with the stabilizer goes on the front. Fold that over. Mark the center like that. Right sides together, I'm going to put the two center clips together and pop the pin down in the center like that. I should have that 5/8 of an inch in from the end, which takes it to there, so I will make sure that's in like that. and the same with the other end. Measure that in too. My sew line's about here, so I need to make sure that that's the 5/8 and also pin that so it doesn't pull out. I'm going to fold that in half, put my pins together, then pull that into here. There's really not much to be gathered in here at all. That's that one, and the same here. Pins together, and then there and there. One fold on top of the other and pin that. I'm a bit shy on this end. I accidentally cut it when I cut the top off. I'm going to pull that into the center of that side, and now this end too. I've measured off my 5/8 of an inch that end, making sure that my gathers are equal. The raw edges are even at the top, and I'm putting in a 5/8 of seam allowance. As I go across, I'll even these out. Make sure that there's equal gathers. Make sure that the top frill is up. There's nothing worse than checking your work and finding that you've got corners underneath your seam. I'll pull this out to this end. As I have on the other side, I measured from where my seam allowance would be to make sure that I do have 5/8 of an inch there too. And there should be at least an inch without any gathers to that point. Pull that a little bit tight. You have to do that so that they stay tight in. Come into the side, to the end like that, and back. Take any pins out, press the seam up so it stays sharp. I've got the back side in of the dress, and I'm going to put the front side in. I've lined up the armholes. If I line up the seam there, it's exact. Bring that round and into position. Put a pin at the base of where the front goes in, like that. And I actually don't want the front to be straight, because if I do that, the front will lift at the bottom. I'm going to mark my 5/8 from that point. I'm going to give her an inch. I have dropped it at the bottom as well. If I put that up there and that there, I'm going to round it like that. I think that looks about right. I'm going to cut up and round. And if I give it a little bit extra, that's fine as well. That's really not going to be a problem. Measure across here, which comes to 13 7/8. Fold that over, measure across. It is 6 7/8. So if I add 5/8 on top, it comes to 7.5. Across the bottom, I'm going to make a mark there. I'll cut that out actually. Flatten that all out again. I'm going to go into where the strap comes in on that side. 12 7/8. Fold that down, comes to 6 3/8, and then 5/8 makes it 7. 7 across the top here, pop that there. I want it to follow the shaping that is on the front. Line the outside here with that. It will make sense. I'm going to bring that down and then round. Here's the outside front and the inside front. Line those up like that. Cut like this along here, and the same along here. Work out where the center of this is, and then I will work out the center of the front and put that in exactly the same way. I've just put the seam here on the strap. She wanted it a little bit wider than was already on there, so I've just made them 2 inches. That should be wide enough for her. I am pressing that seam flat and open. I'm only using the toe of the iron. I really don't want to be pushing creases in that don't need to be there, and I'm not steaming it either. Turn them the right way around. It's going to take a little minute. The last part of this project is working out the straps. Lay that out, make it as even as I can across there. Turn that over. I've got the seam in the center there so that it doesn't cause a problem with anything. I'm going to pop that, because I know this is longer. Let's put that there, across. Fold this down over the top and interline. Make sure that that is absolutely even. That follows that, and I'm going to pin it all the way through so it can't move. Flip that over like that. It's going to be straight at the front and slightly angled at the back. That's what I thought it might be like. Also fold that back and pin it. That one can just be pinned through the top, and that can be unpinned altogether. That's the shape of my new strap, but I will measure from here to the bottom where it goes in, which is 10 1/8. So that's the whole length of the exposed piece of strap. measure. Let's see how well I did. I do that from where that's folded over to here. It is 10 1/8. I'm going to iron those creases in place so I can't lose them. Now that I've got the measurements, I'm going to cut across there to make sure that I have my 5/8 to here. My sew line here, and I'll do the same this end and my 5/8 there. If I lay this on here, right sides together, cut that back there, and then across here, and I open them up, I have a matching pair. I'm going to start by pinning the flat side of the strap to the front like that to hold it, and the same with this one. I'll do one side first and then the second. Measure 5/8 of an inch in from the edge, move that a little way to the edge there, and I'm going to sew it in about 1/4 of an inch from the outside, and then I know it's in position. Do the same on the other end, move it to the 5/8 mark and attach it here. Turn the dress inside out and attach it to the back side as well. Now on the back side I need to make sure that the lower edge is at the 5/8, not the top edge. If it goes in a little bit further, it's not going to make much of a difference, and that's because it goes in at an angle. And then repeat on the other side. Again, make sure the top edge is more or less at the 5/8 like that, and sew across. Line up the underside of the top there at the 5/8 mark, sew across the top of here all the way across, and line up that end like that and make sure that's static. Make sure everything's even, and into the corner. When I say into the corner, I mean literally means where the straps start going down is where I'm going to stop. I'm not sure if that's correct, so I'm going to lift this up. I've got one more stitch to do. That should be it. Before I do very much, I'm going to just cut some of this back like that. Twist this into place like this. Fold the strap back slightly so I don't catch it down. Should be a nice straight line down there now. Put that there. Line it on the 5/8 like that. Keep everything together and sew down and allow it to twist into place. What I need to do is get my sew line just the other side of where this all goes in, like that, and then reverse. That's on that side. I'm going to come back here on this side. I'm also going to cut back a little bit on here so I don't catch it. Now I do tend to do across the top first because that holds everything in place. So I do the second and third side of something like this first, and then I come back for the first side, which I'm doing here. Line that up with the side of there and drop that down just over from the skirt going in. Forward and back a couple of stitches like that, and then line it up with the 5/8. What I forgot to do is pull back the strap all the way to the top. There we go. Come in to the corner, reverse, a couple of stitches forward to the corner, here we go, drop it down and twist it into the first seam and reverse. Before I finish anything off, I'm going to pull that out to make sure that that lines up, which it does, and do the same on this side. Now I'm going to cut midway along all of this top like this. Don't want to cut anything by mistake. To the end here, across the corner, not too close, within 1/8 of the stitching, down and round. Cut all of this back to the other side. Just has to be midway between the raw edge and the good seam that's in there. It's really to take the bulk out. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to just clip in like this, not over the stitches but up to the stitches on both sides. That's because it's shaped, and I really need to make sure that when I pull it out like this, that the shaping goes into shape. If it's not cut back, it tends to go in a straight line and not curve properly. The other thing I am going to do, I'm not going to cut too close, but I'm going to cut across and down like that on both sides so that there's not so much fabric going into those corners. On this side I have to cut back because of the way it's shaped just a little bit so that there's not too much bulk in there. Again, I'm going to just cut up and out slightly for that, and on here take a little bit more off the top there. I've turned everything round and into place. Make sure that nothing is going to be sewn underneath. That's my only worry, is that I will do something daft. Put that down. Now the whole idea is this piece of fabric folds on top of your line of stitching. Don't want it any higher, so you are constantly adjusting everything. And don't pull the top fabric, just let it fold into place. If anything, the bottom should be pulled. I find that if I pick up the foot every now and again and push everything back into place, it goes in better. And as the bulk of the dress gets taken across, it twists less. I'll pop that there. Almost got across. Looks like that's coming down just a wee bit too much. You really need it on that seam. If you let it drop down too much, then you start sewing your top stitch where it shouldn't be showing. Again, like I did on the other side, I'm going to fold all of that up and into place so it's hidden. One side will always go in better than the second. I think that's where we need it. Pop that right in. I think I've got it where I need it. There we go. I'm going to come right into that corner so it's all held into place. Lift the foot up, twist everything around like that, and then follow the shaping of the inside there into the top corner here. Lift the foot up, twist it around, and then I'm going to just over sew where I started by a little way and then reverse. The other thing I will be doing, and this means really be very, very careful, and it's better to do it from this way up, is to cut back the frill towards the fold like that. I'm holding the frill down so I'm not going to get too close, and I'm not cutting close enough to the fold to do any damage. I'm going to work my way all the way around here to keep everything nice and neat and all loose edges and threads gone. And then I'll go around to make sure there's no threads that shouldn't be there in all places. Thank you for joining me on this project. Personally, I think it's turned out really quite pretty. The narrow part here is the front and the wider part there is the back. I was very careful when I put it together so that I knew where the front and the back was. And the weather that we're having at the moment, this is the perfect garment to wear. If you'd like to hear more from me, please subscribe, hit the bell button, and a few thumbs up would be brilliant. And in the meantime, take care. See you later. Ciao.